Welcome. I'm Erica Baum, and I'm the Executive Director of the Blackstone Valley Education Foundation. We're going to do a couple of quick housekeeping things first, but I would encourage you, of course, I can't mandate it, but I would encourage you to show your cameras, keep yourself muted unless we have a question. We'll kind of go over Q&A and how that will work. We are hoping that this will be, an interactive session. So to kind of see who we are is always a plus. For those of you that I know, hi again. For those of you that perhaps we have not met before, I just wanted to tell you a quick little bit about our organization. We are a nonprofit organization, and our role is basically to go ahead and play the liaison between the businesses and our 14 member and affiliate member school districts. So we have various programs, such as, I'm going to highlight a couple that are pertinent to you per se. If you are one of our full member school districts, our grant program cycle is open, and all of grant proposals are due coming up on April 26th. If you have any kind of a project or a fun idea that will extend learning beyond your classroom walls that you would like to be able to do with your students, but perhaps there's just no money in your budget, this is a great opportunity. We have 4 different grants, and all of those can be found on our website. Also, our Art in the Valley program opens. If you're an art teacher, or perhaps you have your own students in the Blackstone Valley schools, that opens. It's going to be virtual this year, like a lot of things, but it is also going to be on our website and will be opening this Friday afternoon. So I encourage you, again, visit our website. There'll be a button right there on our homepage so that you can find your students' work. If you have relatives out of state, maybe grandma, grandpa, they can log on as well to see the work and celebrate all of the students' efforts. So again, why are we here today? Obviously, to learn a little bit more about emotional resiliency and learning the skills to increase the resiliency in students and ourselves as well. I know I'm excited to learn this afternoon as well. A couple of community agreements. Please know that the session is being recorded. We do ask that, again, if you're comfortable, share your screen, but keep yourselves muted. This will be somewhat interactive. So if you have a question at any point in time, please just go ahead and enter it in the chat, and we will certainly answer those as we go. And as conversational as we can, we'll keep it as lighthearted yet informative as we can. So again, trust the process, bring an empathy mindset to work. This is good stuff that we have today. So just a little bit about our agenda. It's basically, I'm introducing now. You see Amy Brewis here. She is the lead coach and educator of BrainFit Academy, and we're excited to learn a lot from her this afternoon. And then as the session closes, I will ask you not to jump off right away, because I will kind of flash a quick QR code. If you have your phone available, you'll be able to just take a very brief 2-question, super easy, fast survey about today's event. So welcome, Amy, and I'm gonna let you take it from here.
Okay, thank you, Erica. So as Erica said, I am the lead coach and educator for BrainFit Academy. So BrainFit Academy is a movement-based program. We work with kids and families who are struggling with ADHD, autism, learning challenges, dyslexia, anxiety. And we work with them one-on-one, but we also provide professional development, of course, just like this, for teachers and professionals to help get the word out there for what we do. It is, like Erica said, this is an interactive session. I will be teaching you some movement-based activities that you can use with your students or with yourself. So I will be, I will be up and moving once we get going here. and teaching you some of that. Myself, just a little bit of background about myself. So I came to BrainFit Academy for my own son. I was an elementary school teacher for 18 years, came to BrainFit Academy for my own son, he's now 15. He's went through the program a few years ago. He's on the autism spectrum. And it helped him tremendously with emotional regulation and being able to access his thoughts, academic skills, focus, all sorts of things improved. I became so passionate about the work that I ended up resigning from my teaching position and am now dedicating myself to this work at BrainFit Academy. So it's really exciting to me. It's something that I feel very passionate about, and I feel very passionate about getting the word out to teachers because I was there and I know what it's like for teachers. And it's, to be honest, full transparency here, I took a leave of absence, not because of COVID, but it just happened to be that way. So I don't even have that aspect. I already know what it was like to be a teacher before COVID. And I can only imagine now this past year, what that's been like and all that added stress on you and the kids. So again, it just solidifies for me why I want to get the word out and think we can do to help everybody get through everyday life, let alone COVID times. So as Erica said as well, questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Just to let you know, I have 2 screens going. So once I start to share my screen, I have my iPad as well. So it may look like I'm not looking at you, but it's because I'm actually looking at you and not at what I'm sharing. I also have my notes down on a paper. So I don't want people to think like I'm not looking right at the camera. That's why I'm looking between notes and 2 screens to get this presentation going. So having said that, let me pull up my presentation. I'll share my screen and we'll get going here. All right, I'm just gonna there we go. Okay, so emotional resilience through movement. As I said, BrainFit Academy is a movement-based program. So I'm going to be teaching you some movement tools that you can use with yourself and your students, okay? So that's me. I am the lead coach and educator for BrainFit Academy, and I am also a Brain Gym licensed movement facilitator. So Brain Gym is a movement program, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about Brain Gym when we get there, but I am a movement facilitator for Brain Gym. Okay, so resilience, that's what we're here for, right? The ability to recover quickly from difficulties, trauma, and stress, right? Key words here are recovering quickly. We all have stress in our lives. We all have things we have to deal with, but we want to be able to come back from that. We won't want to get stuck in this place where stress becomes us, right? And same for our kids in the classroom. We don't want that to become a part of their life. As we said, as I was saying before, the pandemic, right? The pandemic has brought on stress. Just going to the grocery store, we now have stresses, right? I can remember the first time I went into the grocery store after COVID starts, and I'm like in panic mode, right? I'm sure many of you can relate to this. I'm like looking around like, who touched what? Like I've got my mask on and I'm like, can I go down this aisle and stay away from this person? I can't get too close, 6 feet away, right? It's increased the stress tenfold in all of us. But we want to be able to come back from that. We want to be able to recover from that stress and not get stuck there. All right. Then we have this added stressor now. Schools are going back full time. How many of you, just show me a raise of hands if you're got your cameras on there. How many are already back full time with all your students? Okay, some of you. So that's got to be stressful too, right? So now you've got your hybrid or maybe full remote, and now you're back in school. All your kids are back in school and you've got less space between you. So this is increasing the stress. Okay. So again, want to be able to recover quickly. Okay. So at BrainFit, we look at the brain as having three parts, 3 levels. And there's actually a 4th one here, the purple, I'm going to touch upon. But our main things that we're looking at are these 3 levels, the red, the green, and the blue. All right. And it's called the triune brain theory by Dr. Paul MacLean, triune, Triune, brain theory. Okay. And so the way the theory goes here is that what we look at is that the brain develops over time in three ways. Okay. So starting with the brainstem down here, and we call this the baby brain. Okay. Whoops. The baby brain. And we call it the baby brain because we use a lot of terminology at BrainFit to make it easier for the kids. Now, if you were talking to middle school students, you probably wouldn't call it the baby brain. You could call it the brainstem, right? But it just makes it a little easier to comprehend. The other reason why we call it the baby brain is because this is the first part of the brain to develop. When you are first, conceived, your brain starts from the bottom up. It develops from the baby brain, the brainstem, and works its way up towards the higher levels. Okay. The baby brain serves a couple of roles. Sensory information comes into the baby brain, okay, comes into that brainstem. All sensory information except for the sense of smell. Ideally, that information is going to integrate like a tapestry, right? We want it to come in and kind of just integrate into the brain so that we can process it effectively. That's sensory integration. That's what sensory integration is. You probably have heard the term sensory integration. I know as a teacher, for me, I had heard the term sensory integration, but I never really fully understood what that meant until I came to BrainFit and started learning about this. The brainstem also governs survival mechanisms. So breathing, digestion, automatic movement patterns, which we call primitive reflexes. Those are all governed by the baby brain, the brainstem. All right. Then we have the emotional brain. Now, the emotional brain's job is to decide if the information that's coming into the brainstem is safe or a threat. Okay, so safe meaning interesting, familiar. Okay, safe to us, right? Or is it a threat to my survival? Meaning it could be embarrassing, too challenging, right? Scary. Doesn't have to be a real threat. It can be a perceived threat. The emotional brain's job is to organize those emotions. So the information comes into the baby brain, is diverted up here to the emotional brain, and the emotional brain goes, hang on a second. Is this safe? Okay. Or is it a threat? And two things are going to happen, right? So if the information is safe, that it's going to go up to what we call the thinking brain. Okay. So up here, that allows us to respond to the information. It gives us the ability to organize our body, our thoughts, and our environment. This is where the resilience is. Information comes into the baby brain, emotional brain says, yep, I'm good with that, sends it up to the thinking brain. Whoops, I just lost my screen share. Hang on, sorry about that. Okay, can you still see? Okay, good, sorry, I think I swiped the wrong way there. So thinking brain is the ability to respond, and that's where that resilience comes in, okay? This is also where all the academic learning takes place. So the thinking brain is where we're expecting kids to come into a classroom and be able to access this thinking brain all the time, right? All day long, we're saying, learn this, do this, learn this, here's this to memorize, here's a new subject. We are asking them to access the thinking brain all day long. The problem comes in is that when the brain perceives the information as a threat, now this is not just information like facts and figures, this is sensory information, lights, sounds, social interactions, any kind of information coming into our brain, okay? If the emotional brain decides that the information is a threat to our survival, okay, so embarrassing, difficult, whatever, makes us feel unsafe for whatever reason, that information then gets diverted down to the baby brain, down to the brainstem, which puts us into a fight, flight, freeze response, a stress response. Okay, you all have probably heard, I'm sure you've all heard of the fight, flight, freeze response. When we are in that response, we are no longer able to respond to the information, we are reacting to it. Okay, so we're reacting in different ways, and we're going to talk about behavioral reactions and physiological reactions. And then we have, and when that happens as well, stress hormones are released, right? So we have adrenaline and cortisol pumping through our body on a constant basis, or it may happen for a little while, but if we don't have that resilience and we're not able to come back from it, that's when we get into this constant cycle of adrenaline and cortisol running through our body continuously, which can cause all sorts of issues with digestion and immune system and all sorts of things. All right, and then we have the prefrontal cortex, we call the executive brain. That's the purple part here, okay? You've heard of executive functioning. It's one of the buzzwords that's come out in the last 3 or 4 years, especially in education. And the executive functioning is where so many kids are struggling, right? They're struggling with planning, monitoring behavior, attention to detail, working memory, judgment, organizing for long-term projects, all that sort of thing, right? If they can't access their thinking brain, so if kids are in this fight, flight, freeze, stress response, that information, now that stuff that's coming into them, they can't even access their thinking brain, let alone get up to the very front of that thinking brain, the prefrontal cortex, in order to get to those executive functioning skills. So this is why we see so many kids having trouble here, because it's, if you stop and look at it, it's probably a lot of those same kids who are spending a lot of their time in the fight, flight, freeze response. Okay, so it's not that they don't have the skills, they just can't access them. And you can say to kids, and we can teach kids executive functioning skills. My son went through a program at his school. They a couple of years, well, I guess it was pre-COVID, but they had an executive functioning class, right? So they were teaching him all of those skills. Now, it was beneficial to an extent, but if it was spending all this time in that fight, flight, freeze response, even though he learned those skills, when in the moment, he couldn't access them, couldn't get to it, because he was spending all this time down here in the lower part of the brain. Okay. Does anybody have any questions so far? Okay, so I'm going to keep going. So that fight, flight, freeze response, we like to think of it as survival mode, right? The brain is in survival mode. The brain thinks that there is a threat to my survival, and I'm going to do what I can to keep myself safe. And there are behavioral reactions that come with that and physiological reactions that come with that. And we're going to talk about those, okay, and what that might look like with kids or adults for that matter. So we think about the fight response, okay? So fight, flight tend to go together, and they can kind of switch back and forth. And I'll tell you an interesting story in a minute. But these are the kids, right? And you all know these kids. These are the kids who are fighting back. These are the ones who we walk on eggshells around because we don't know how they're going to react, right? We go in the classroom and we say, be careful around Johnny because, last week he had a, meltdown or whatever. So we don't know what to do because we're trying to help these kids, but at the same time, we have to be careful of their reaction and think about how they're going to respond to things, right? And then we have, so frustration, right? A lot of frustration, explosive. Those kids that, melt, they just drop of a hat, you give them a math paper in front of them and all of a sudden they're like, what? I can't do, no, I'm not gonna, right? So this fight reaction, it is a stress response. It's a behavioral response to stress. Aggressive, kids, I know there's kids who throwing things, hitting things, whatever. Resistance, just that constant resistance. I'm not going to do it. Acting out. No, I won't. Right. Again, fighting back, whatever that fighting back. Sometimes sometimes it can be like coming off as what we might say is fresh, right? Like I work with a 12-year-old right now who she is totally in this fight flight response, and the way it shows behaviorally for her is she comes off as being like fresh. So I say something to her, she's like, well, why do you call it that? Like, what's up with that? And I keep reminding myself, she is not being fresh. It is her fight response. This is her fight flight response to me. This is how she's showing it because her body is in survival mode, okay, in her brain. Then we have the flight, right? So distractible. They're in class, they just can't focus. Clowning, right? So if they're clowning, they get attention for being silly, but they also distract the teacher. So now I don't have to learn what the teacher was trying to teach us, right? Redirecting, they're the ones that say, hey, what about, remember yesterday you said that we were gonna read that book, or remember yesterday, or when's lunch, right? Escape behaviors, going to the bathroom. This is, an actual flight, going to the bathroom. Can I go to the bathroom? Can I go to the bathroom? Right. Or we have a lot of times, you might see the actual flight risk kids, right? The kids who will literally flee the building. I mean, I was in a 4th and 5th grade school for a long time, and we had kids, we call it flight risk, right? You're out on recess duty, you had to watch those kids because you never knew whether they were going to take off. Okay. Escape behaviors, just trying to escape again, and then bored easily. And one of the things we say at BrainFit is when kids are bored, it can be that they really are bored because they're not able to make an emotional connection to the material that's being presented. If their brain is in this fight, flight, freeze and in survival mode, it's really hard to make an emotional connection to whatever's happening, especially when you're not interested in the material. So they come off as being bored, or they really are bored because they're just not connecting emotionally. Okay. I want to just tell you a quick story before I talk about freeze, just a quick story about fight, flight, and how this can look with some kids. So I worked in a 4th and 5th grade school, and I was the technology person for a number of years. And I've also taught 4th grade classroom teacher, but at the time I was a technology teacher. So my space was in the library, and the library was like in the center of the building. We had a 4th grade classroom that was across from the hall from me. There was a little girl, 4th grade. She came into 4th grade completely in flight. Like anytime anything got difficult, anytime there was something that was a little bit more challenging for her, she would flight. She would leave the room and she would come flying through the library space. And I would just kind of look behind and watch, because she had an aide with her, like a teacher assistant, behavioral assistant. And so I would just kind of watch, to see, given a 30 seconds. And then I would see the teacher, where'd she go? And she went that way, right? And they would go after her. Well, this happened 3-4 times a week, at least the whole 4th grade year. She comes to 5th grade now. 5th grade, within 2 weeks of being in 5th grade, she was completely in fight. No longer was she flighting when something happened. She started fighting back, frustration, explosive anger, throwing things, kicking teachers. Like it was a complete shift, like overnight, from flight to fight. Same reaction, same brain response, but completely different behavioral reaction. So just something, I like to tell that story because it's just something to think about. What you might see as one or the other can switch between with the same student. And it can happen not in a year, in a day or an hour or whatever. Okay. And then we have the freeze response. Okay. So freeze, whiny, teary, clingy, right? The younger kids, these are the ones that are clinging to their parents, don't want to go to school. But even in middle school, you see kids coming in, they don't want to go to school. They're hiding in the corner. They don't want to try new things. You ask them a question and they just look at you like they literally freeze and don't say a word, because it's not that they don't have the knowledge or the information. They freeze. Their body is in, this is a threat to my survival. Okay. These are also kids. Yes.
Amy, can I interrupt? Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So as you are describing, these 3 different types of behavioral reactions, how do you distinguish between, other than if you have a child that, like the girl you just described, who is continuously engaging in these things, how do you, as a teacher or a parent, distinguish between the student that it's a true behavioral reaction to more of a conscious choice, where, like the girl that you said, she's not being fresh? Well, sometimes kids make those choices. So how do you distinguish between the two?
I think, you've got to get to know the kid first of all, right? But then look at when is it happening, number one. So is this happening on a continual basis? And even if it is happening on if it's happening on a continual basis, it depends on the kid. It really does. But if it's happening continuously and it's happening when, you're coming into class and all of a sudden, like, that's when the demands start to be placed, right? Then you've got to stop and think, is this a reaction to, this is a threat to my survival? That math test is now, I can't do it, or I'm worried about it. And so this is how I'm going to react, right? So thinking about that, yes, it does get tricky. You've got to, like I said, you've got to know the kid. As a teacher, when I learned about all of this information, I started to look at kids completely differently, all behaviors completely differently. So I started to look at those kids who had these reactions and really stopped to think, where is this coming from? Is this a stress response? And most likely it is. And it might not be a stress response coming from school, right? It could be stress going on at home that we don't even know about. So there could be kids coming in and they're going to react to that math test or coming into class and sound fresh, but really that stress is happening at home because mom or dad lost his job during COVID. And now we don't, we can barely get food on the table. So there's so many things that could be happening. It's really about looking at those kids and just, like you said at the beginning, Erica, empathy, right? And having a little more empathy for those kids and looking at their reactions and looking at their behaviors in a different way. Okay. Instead of going right to, oh, they're just fresh, or, oh, they just are choosing to talk back because. Is there a reason? Is this coming from a stress response? And I would say probably most of the time it is from somewhere coming from that. And then it's how we deal with it and how we work with those kids.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so behavioral, that's the behavioral reactions. Now we get into, checking time here, physiological reactions, okay? So our bodies, when we go into this fight, flight, freeze, certain things happen in our bodies as well, all right? So tightening of the back of the muscles in the body. Our bodies are designed to pull us back from danger. Think about if you walk out in front of a car, okay, and car comes in front of you, you automatically pull back like this. That is a reflexive response that all human beings have to pull us away from danger. And that tightens all the muscles in the back of our body. Now, if we're in this constant state of stress, those muscles don't relax again. They can be constantly tight. So, and I know, like, we can't touch kids in school, and I get that, but you can sometimes with kids, you can look at their calf muscles and they're like, just by looking at them, you can tell their heart is rock. That's a stress response. Those muscles are not relaxed the way they should be, okay? Breathing becoming fast and shallow. So, when we're in the stress response, it's really hard to take a deep breath. And one of the things we always, I'm sure everybody's heard, like, take a deep breath, take a deep breath. Sometimes that's really hard to do when you're in a stress response because your diaphragm shortens and tightens. And we're going to learn a movement that can actually help with that, to help take a deep breath. The heart rate increases, pumping blood to the big muscles and away from the digestive system and higher level brain. All right. So when we go into that fight flight response, our blood gets pumped to our big muscles to fight or to flight with our legs, right? To take off or to fight back. And so the blood moves away from the digestive system and the higher level brain. So those kids who are saying, my stomach hurts, I don't feel good, if they're in a stress response, they really truly may not be digesting their food well because the blood is constantly being diverted away from the digestive system. Your body says, I don't need to send blood to the digestive system if I'm going to die in the next minute. Okay. So we always say, oh, just, go ahead, honey, you're fine, but go to the nurse, right? But they may truly be having trouble digesting their food because they're in that stress response. Also, along with that is that adrenaline and cortisol release. Adrenaline and cortisol can also cause interruptions in the digestive system. All right, so that can help also add to that. Pupils dilate and move to the periphery. So as we are in the stress response, our bodies, our eyes move out to the periphery a little bit to help us look for danger. Think about if you're in a dark parking lot, your eyes scan more, right? You're like more alert. And this can happen on a daily basis. If our eyes are in the periphery more and not and constantly looking out for danger, when we ask kids to sit down and read a passage or, you know, look up at the board, it's much harder to focus on a certain thing that's in front of you because your eyes want to move all around, constantly looking out for safety. We see this all the time with kids that we work with. We can literally look at their eyes, have them try and focus on an object, and their eyes are bouncing all over the place because they're looking out for safety. Their eyes are looking out for safety. Okay. And then the jaw locks. So I, for one, can tell when I had a really stressful day because the next day my jaw is killing me. And I don't realize that my jaw was so tight, but your jaw, you know, clenches down because if you were in a real danger, then your body is protecting your ability to eat. So it locks your jaw in place. Okay. All right. Any questions so far or at this point?
I encourage all of you to, you know, even if there's a particular student that you're thinking of or a particular scenario, if you want to, you know, kind of just ask Amy about that, now's the time to do it. We're a small enough group that kind of conversation is more than welcome. So feel free.
Go ahead.
Hey, I'm sorry, my first name's not there. I know. Amy also. So
Okay.
so that we're not confused, but I just wanted to say that I agree, like what you're saying is resonating. For me personally, it's the shoulders. So whether it be the same day or the next day, I know I'm like, oh my gosh, everything's all tensed up. But I often find myself in class, and I do work with small groups, so it works well to just kind of cater to individual needs. But if I see a student getting flustered with something, we just pause, we take a deep breath in together, really slow, and a deep breath out. We do that twice, and it really seems to work to reset so that they realize that it's okay to take a break. You know, this isn't a high pressure situation. Let's just reset and start again. It seems to have a positive effect.
And Amy, I think you're going to like the movements that I'm going to teach you because those are ones that you can do, right? Like what you were just saying.
Okay,
so
and I do teach remotely, so anything that can be done sort of in that interface would be great.
Yeah, these can all be done remotely. I mean,
Thanks.
I'm doing them remotely with you guys.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anybody else before we're going to be getting into the movements in a minute? Okay. So resilience, the ability to recover quickly from difficulties, trauma, or stress, right? So managing our lower brain. So I talked about the emotional brain and the baby brain. So how do we do that? Well, we use movement. Okay. So managing the lower brain using movement. So we have the stress response. We use movement to help us feel calm, to feel safe, and to improve processing between both sides of the brain. All right. When we do that, it helps us to respond to the information coming in, the sensory information, and bring that resilience so that learning can happen. All right. So intentional physical movement. When, like I said, when we feel safe, okay, just like Amy was saying, her students, you know, she has them take a nice deep breath. This is a safe space. Let's just take a deep breath and recenter ourselves, and then we can continue. Same kind of thing. When we feel safe, we're better able to learn because we can access our thinking brain. Remember, this is red, baby brain, green, emotional brain, blue, thinking brain. We want to get up to here, but we can't go from stress to here. Doesn't work. We've got to take a route around. Okay, and movement's one way to do that. Okay, so brain gym for tools for emotional resilience. Okay, facilitate calming. Just a little thing about brain gym. So brain gym is a learning readiness program. It was developed by a couple called Gail and Paul Dennison. It was in the 70s, I believe, that it was first developed. It consists of 26 different movements that are easy to teach and do, help with whole brain learning, support and enhance learning, and can help us move out of that survival mode. They are used in schools throughout the whole entire world. I first learned about brain gym when I taught second grade back in the 2000s, early 2000s, used it with my students then, used it with my students when I was in fourth grade, revisited it again when I started working at BrainFit, and started using it as a specialist as well. Okay. Is anyone, I know Erica had said that she had heard of brain gym. Has anyone else ever heard of brain gym? No. Yes, somebody. Okay. Okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to teach you some movements. How are we doing for time? 1:08. Okay. The first one I'm going to teach you is something called hookups. And this is a 2-part movement. We're going to do this one sitting down. It can be done standing. It can be done lying down, which we wouldn't really be doing in schools, but just for you or for your own children, you might want to do this if you were lying down. So what this, before I teach it to you, what hookups does is it helps us to bring back the attention in our bodies to our center. So I talked about how when you're in a fight flight, the attention goes to your extremities, right? For that fight flight response, all the blood and goes to the big muscles. When we do hookups, it helps to bring that attention back to center, sending a message to our brain that we are safe and we are secure where we are. Okay, so a lot of these movements that we do, what they do is they're sending you, we're using physical movement to send messages to our brain to help us to calm down or to help with processing. Okay, so to do hookups, you can do it right where you're sitting. Just cross one leg over the other at the ankle like she is here. Okay, your hands go thumbs down and then cross them and hook them up, bring them up to your chest like that. So, yep, Amy. So I do thumbs up, thumbs down, cross. Yep. And then bring it up to your chest like that. Okay. And your tongue is going to go to the roof of your mouth where you would click. So if you went, you're going to hold your tongue in that position. Okay. And while you're holding it there, just take some nice deep breaths. Just kind of, you can close your eyes if you want to. And we're just going to hold that position for about 30 seconds. Just relax your eyes. And then the second part, just bring our fingertips together. And this is a metaphor for bringing both sides of the brain together to center. But I use this a lot just for mindfulness. You can just, have kids just tap their fingers a little bit like this. I'll have them tap one finger at a time. You'll be surprised at how challenging that can be for some kids. But it really just brings that attention to the middle of your body, to that midline, and can be very calming and relaxing. Okay. All right. So just to make sure I didn't miss anything that I wanted to tell you. Okay. So that's the first one. Okay. Any questions about hookups? These can be done anytime, like Amy was saying, like before you're going to do an activity. If you have a time when you're going to take a test, you could have kids do hookups. You could do them when you first start the day to just kind of get everybody ready for learning. It's a great one to do anytime you want to have like a calming situation, okay, or getting out of that stress, feeling calmer. All right. Okay, the next one is called positive points. And this one, actually, it's really I find this very interesting. There's something called neurovascular points on our forehead, okay? And what it actually does is when we hold these points, it helps to draw blood away from our survival brain, or away from our brainstem up to our higher level, the higher level parts of our brain. This one is really good to help us to respond instead of react, right? This can help us to access our thoughts when we're in a stress response and we can't access them, okay? So I'm going to teach you how to do this. So there's a couple ways, but basically you're taking your fingers, use your 4 fingers, and I'm going to zoom, like come into the camera here so you can see me. And I'm just putting my fingers right above my eyebrows, and then just going to very gently pull the skin taut between your fingers so that it's just, you know, a little bit tighter. And if if I was doing this with kids in a school, I might have them just rest their elbows on their desk. It's a little easier. You can just have them do that. You can also just go like this and just have, a hand. But as you hold these points, okay, you can use these when kids are coming in from the playground. And, I remember, and this would be younger kids, obviously, but they come in from the playground and so-and-so said so-and-so about, and you've got these 2 kids who are like all worked up, and you've got to figure out what happened and all of that. So you can have them, let's just sit down, let's just, do our positive points and just kind of get to our thinking brain, right? Think about, that's really what positive points does, helps us to get to our thinking brain, to access our thoughts so that, and come out of that response so that we can respond with what we need to talk about or whatever it is. Okay. Any questions on that one? And please, if you're not sure, if you feel like you need me to explain it again, I want you to come away from this being able to do these movements on your own. So I'm walking you through them, but I want to, take notes if you feel like you need to, so that you can go away and say, oh, I know how to do this. I can remember how to do these movements. Okay. Amy, did you have a question?
I was just going to say, I call that one the facelift.
Facelift.
That's what I felt like I was doing.
Yeah. Okay. The next one is called the grounder, and we're going to get up for this one. There's 2 that we're going to be, actually a couple are going to be up for. So this one, I'm going to back up. Actually, I'm going to stop sharing just for a minute so you can see me bigger, because I do have to back up for this one. Okay, that'll allow you to see me a little bigger. Hang on one sec here. Okay. So for the grounder, 1 foot, your hands go on your hips. Can you see my feet? Yeah. 1 foot goes out to the side, okay, at like a 90-degree angle. Your hips stay facing forward, and you spread your legs so that when you come over this leg that's bent, and I'm going to just turn my head to look on the side that my leg is bent, and I'm just going to give a good lengthening down here. What this does is, you remember how I was saying about taking a deep breath, right? There is a muscle called the psoas muscle. You may have heard of it. It's a large hip flexor that comes right down, attaches right around your knee and comes up over around the hip, okay? When the psoas muscle tightens with stress and excessive sitting. How much sitting have we been doing in the past year, right? Even for teachers, okay? Then we do the other side, okay? This lengthens this here. The important things you need to remember about the grounder is hips need to stay facing forward and hands on your hips, and you're coming straight over the foot that is extended, like your knee comes straight over the foot. You don't want to, kids will tend to turn their knee a little. Actually, I'm going to stay up here. Kids will tend to turn their leg out. It can be a little difficult to find that movement, but it is a great one to pair with that deep breathing, because if you do the grounder first, it loosens up that psoas muscle. When the psoas muscle is tight, it has a direct connection to the diaphragm and it tightens the diaphragm. So it's really interesting because when the diaphragm is tight, it's harder for us to take a deep breath. So loosen up the psoas, loosens the diaphragm, easier to take a deep breath. Okay. Okay, the next one is called calf pump. And let me tell you what this one does first. So calf pump addresses one of those physiological reactions, the tightening of the muscles in the back of the body. So remember how I said those calf muscles can be really tight. And even if you're looking at kids, you might be able to tell that they're really tight. As we lengthen the calf muscle, it helps to discharge that fear response, that tightening of the muscles, and as the muscles return to a more normal tone. Okay, it's a physical way to send a message to the body, to the brain, that I'm safe. Okay, I don't need to tighten up that muscle. I'm safe. It's good. Everything's good. Okay, so for this one, you can do it up against a wall. If I happen to have a wall, you don't have to do it against a wall. You could have a chair. You could just do it without anything. I'm going to do it with a wall just to show you. One leg goes behind. Okay, front leg bends. Just gonna make sure you can see my feet. Can you see my feet? Give me a thumbs up if you can see my feet. Okay, good. So both feet are facing forward. So both feet are facing forward and my front knee is bent. And as I come up I'm going to straighten this front knee and I'm going to come up on my heel with the back foot. Do you see that? So it's a shorten, tall. So we say it's like a short, tall. So I'm pumping that back calf. And as I do that each time, it's lengthening that muscle. Okay. So front leg straightens, back leg just comes up on the calf. Okay, it comes up on, the heel comes up like that. Then I switch, again, both feet facing forward. Okay, it's an important one to remember. And then heel comes up, front leg straightens and then bends. Straightens and bends, okay? Remember to breathe as you're doing this. Remind kids to breathe. They hold your breath. We all hold our breath when we're learning something new. We hold our breath, okay? So breathe. Okay. Any questions on those movements? Because I'm going to teach you a few more before we, we're just watching the time here, making sure, mindful of you guys' time. Okay. Let me get my slideshow back up again here. Sorry. Okay. So we did the grounder, we did the calf pump. Okay. And so again, resilience, managing our lower brain, emotional resilience. And now we're going to do some movements that help to improve the processing between the two sides of the thinking brain. Okay. So when we're under stress, communication between the two hemispheres breaks down. Okay. So we can't, and I like this little, left brain, right brain, like, what? I'm just too stressed to talk to you right now. Okay. So when we're under stress, it's hard to access both sides of the brain and have them work cooperatively together, which is an ideal state, right? We want to be able to work between the two sides of the brain. And when they're not, it's much harder to do what we need to do. Okay. So we want to be able to process both sides. So these movements can help with that. This one is called the thinking cap. And what the thinking cap does, it's basically an ear massage, but it releases tension in the area around the ears, the neck, and the shoulders. So Amy, again, this would be a good one for you because this helps to release the tension in the neck, okay? When this happens, so in Brain Gym, they found a really correlation between auditory processing and tension in the neck and shoulders. So if you have a lot of tension being held in your neck and shoulders, again, tightening in the back of the body, it's harder to process things auditorily. So the thinking cap helps with that. So that's why I have this under processing. okay? It brings blood flow to the ears, helps enhance that auditory processing, and also releases tension in the neck and the shoulders, okay? So the way you do this, and I'm gonna zoom in my ear, you get to all look at my ear for a minute. You start at the top. Can you see my ear? Okay. You start at the top and you're just going to unroll the cartilage in your ear. You're starting from the inside out and you're just like flat. It's like you're flattening your ear, okay? Inside out, and you're working your way down all the way to the earlobe. Okay, you can do both at the same time, and typically do both at the same time. Okay, starting at the top, inside out to the inside edges to the outside, and then you're just rolling out your, trying to like flatten your ears, okay? We typically do that 3 times. You can also, for tension, if you have like a certain side that's tight, if you turn your head to that side and then do the thinking cap, it's kind of a double whammy, all right? So it'll help release that tension in the neck as well when you're doing it with your head turned to one side or the other. So then have it turn the other side and then just do the thinking caps there too, okay? All right. I have 2 more to go. Any questions? I think we've got enough time. All right. The next one is the cross crawl. And this one is a favorite. Okay, we do this one a lot, and I'm going to stop sharing so that you can see me in a minute. But what the cross crawl does is it helps us to cross our the vertical midline. Okay, so we all have this midline of the body, and the left side of our body is controlled by the right hemisphere of our brain, and our right side of our body is controlled by the left side of our brain. And so we want to be able to easily cross that midline for lots of reasons, but when we're thinking about processing, it helps to activate both sides of the brain so that we can they can work together better. Okay? So to do this one, it's basically, you're just taking one hand and you're touching the opposite knee. Okay, this is the basic cross crawl. There are lots of other ways you can do this. We can do elbows. Okay, we can do feet, touching our feet. Right. For older kids, you can, even younger kids, but older kids, you might even start here sooner, going behind. So touching the foot behind. That requires kids to be able to also cross the front back midline, which can be tricky. So as you're, doing this, teaching them this, younger kids, you can do this like in a skip or a hop or a march around the room. So there's lots of ways that you can do the cross crawl, but it helps with processing. Awesome one to do before you're going to do an activity like reading or writing or anything that requires crossing of that midline. Anything like that can be a good time to do that. All right, and the last one is, let me share my screen. Actually, I'm not going to share my screen, but it's Lazy 8s. You all have the handout. Because I'm going to have to stop in a second anyway. Lazy 8s, so it's called what we call Lazy 8s. Lazy 8s helps with the eyes. It helps the eyes cross the visual midline. So remember that I was talking about how when we're in the stress response, our eyes are looking out for safety, right? So this gets our eyes moving in a pattern. The eyes need to be able to work together when we're reading or we're doing anything, on a page, right? Think about writing, reading, we have to be able to track left to right, and we need to be able to do that smoothly and clearly, okay? So to do Lazy 8s, we can do it multiple ways. I'm going to show you how we would do it in the air. I always have their kids, you put your thumb up, start at your nose just to find your center point, and you come out about 12 inches. You don't want to have a straight arm. You're going to have your arm bent, okay? Starting in the center and coming up and around. So you want to be up in the center, coming up and around. You're making an 8 on its side. And as you do this, you're following your thumb with your eyes, okay? So your eyes are following that thumb all the time. We do one side, then we switch and we do the other side. Okay, we would do this for longer. I'm kind of going through because I know we're running out of time. All right. And then we do both hands together, bringing both hands together. And when you do that, you would cross your thumbs. Okay. So now you've got a fist, but your thumbs are crossed and you're doing it 2 hands together like this. Okay. Always watching with your eyes. This is the hardest part, is following your hands with your eyes. Okay. You can do 8s in the air. You can do 8s on paper. Okay. If you're having kids do it on paper, you just want that cross part of the 8 to be in the middle of the paper. You can do them on whiteboards. Okay. Awesome, awesome one to do anytime you want to have both sides of the brain talking together. Cross crawls and lazy 8s are 2 really good activities. All right, I know we're running out of time. So let me just say two important things that I like to tell teachers. When you're using these in the classroom, if you've got a whole classroom full of kids, teach the movements to the whole classroom full of kids. Don't make it like, I know Amy sees small groups. If you see small groups, teach it to your whole small group. But if you teach it to everybody there, it's not like weird, right? Because if there's certain kids are going to go off, oh, go do a brain gym, honey. Like, then everybody else is like, what is he doing over there? And you see somebody, you know, because they look a little weird. But if you do them together as a whole class, then it's not weird. And the kids will start to do it on their own. Once they know how to do the movements, they will choose to do them because they know that they help them and they'll choose. The other thing to know is you don't have to do the movements. Like, some kids may choose to do cross crawls because it helps them to calm down, or they might choose positive points because it helps them to process. So I'm putting it in that blanket of processing or calming, but really any one can be used for anything. And the kids know they'll choose the ones that they like the best and they'll gravitate to certain ones. Okay. Erica, so go ahead. I'm going to pass it back over to Erica. So thank you everybody for attending. And I hope you came away with something useful that you can use right away. That's my goal. And yeah, thank you. Thank you for letting me share my passion with you.
Amy, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. I know I learned some new movements that I can use myself to be calming. I am definitely guilty of the clenching of the jaw, and my dentist can confirm that. So definitely, for all of you who have attended today, hope that you found it valuable. If you have your phone, literally, if you just click on your camera and just kind of point it at the QR code, you'll have a link. It'll say Open Tapple US. Go ahead and click on that. Take a minute to do the survey. Also, this is really important. If you have not yet joined our member community, I encourage you to visit our website, bveducationfoundation.org. And there's an icon right there. You can join the member community. Like I said, this is being recorded. If you join the community, you will absolutely have access to this recording at a later date as well. So again, thank you very much, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.